WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by JW Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We Should Know's on there. I want to thank you for being with us today. Each and every week on Tuesdays, we come to you at 2:30, not only on Star Communications Channel 16, we're simulcast on WCLN Radio. In addition, on Tuesday, Thursday at 7 p.m., I would remind you, you can pick this show up and watch it again, or if you heard it and maybe you're in your car and you want to pick up on a particular point and you forgot to record or what have you, Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. A number of folks have emailed me about our announcement of our celebration of our 10 years of doing this. Believe it or not, I'm as surprised as you are that a decade has gone by and we've been doing We Should Know, starting back in 2010. Now look at the calendar and it's undeniable. It is 2020, and our guest each and every week has made this show what it is. This week we're talking about a subject and talking with somebody that I've known, I guess, all my life. Robert Gilmore, first of all, let me thank you for being with us today and taking time to come in and sit down and have a conversation about, not only about you and what's going on, but about some key issues that we'll be facing.
Thank you, Mr. JW.
As a brief introduction, however, I've got to be a little bit somewhat boastful because you and I both grew up in the same community. I've known you all my life, known your family all my life, just very respectful of people like that is what makes communities strong. I want to kind of introduce you in this way, and I'm going to kind of poignantly point out that you're someone that has stepped up and moved forward in the area of law. Not only did you receive honors in your undergraduate degree, summa cum laude, and for folks that don't understand what that Latin word represents, it's the highest distinction in academics that anybody can be paid is summa cum laude, and there's magna and cum laude. But when you get summa cum laude, it's something that, but now here's what I want to point out to folks. You went to Campbell University and you received a degree and earned the highest distinction. And with that said, there was an interesting part to me because in your undergraduate work, you majored first in trust and wealth management and graduated with the high honor. But then, guess what? You decided to go to law school. You finished Campbell University Law School as the #1 summa cum laude, highest distinction, #1 in your class in law school. After that, you stepped out and you were a prosecutor. As you decided to do that, you went into that world and you went in as Robert Gilmore always does, guns loaded, wide open, let's get it done. And you got honors throughout the state. A lot of folks found out what you could do in a court and in a trial court as a prosecutor. And then from that, you decided, well, and you and I talked about some of these things. Yes. You decided, I want to come back to Clinton. I want to be a trial lawyer in Clinton. I want to help people in Clinton. That said, and the public probably knows about that, you've achieved some great things, and you live right here in Clinton with your wife, Ashley, and your son, Cole. Tell us about your journey, though, Robert. I mentioned to some folks the other day, and before we started, in my introduction here, that I ended up going into education because I discovered I didn't want to be in a tobacco patch. If you would share just your journey in life, because a lot of people might not know a lot about you. They might know you from seeing you in court, or they might know seeing you around town, but you've got an interesting background. And I know one person, I want to mention his name in introducing you as well. I know somebody would like to hear about that too, is somebody by the name of Mac Herring.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Keener, just as you were, went to Hopkins schools. Mm-hmm. For me, a lot of this backstory were things, obviously, before I had a memory. I was born at 25 weeks gestation, back when you didn't survive that birth oftentimes, and if you did, there were great complications. Was very fortunate. I'll give a great compliment to the folks at UNC Chapel Hill. Even though we might not pull for their sports teams, they got a great hospital. and they were able to pull me through. We had some harrowing times, obviously at that time. Outlook was not great for the future. Even forecast of potential intellectual disabilities, that kind of thing, long term. Luckily, that was not the case. That was not the case due to one of what I believe is the greatest community in the world, which is the one I grew up in. Very supportive, very understanding, helped me push boundaries everywhere I went. They were willing to allow me to start school, which was even controversial back then as to whether I should be allowed to start school. And that was through the influence of people like Mac Herring, Dr. Herring, for folks that know him from his pediatrician days.
Yeah.
And just the community at large being a very open-minded community to allowing children, hey, we can give them a shot. I was very fortunate, excelled in school, excelled through Hopton. Very proud to be a Wildcat, very proud to have went to Hopton. I was actually observing a hearing the other day. I had came in to see a judge that was on the bench, and the young man that was the subject of the custody hearing was talking about Hopton schools, and I was telling the judge afterwards what a great school Hopton is and how proud I was of it. But I was raised in a blue-collar family, just like you, right there on a family farm. My parents, my dad was one of the first employees at Hogslat, one of the very early employees at Hogslat. Worked there for many years. My mom worked production at Hogslat, set records in production building hog feeders. I always say she's one of the toughest people on the face of the earth.
Amen.
We've been through some health challenges with her this week, and we're glad those are working out well. But just a very down-to-earth, blue-collar raising. We struggled through the things that all the families around here struggle through. You think about where and how the meals are going to be done next week. Light bills, house payments, things of that nature, the things everybody deals with when you live in a blue-collar community. But I always had a lot of love, always had a lot of support, always had a lot of encouragement. So for me, in that way, I was really a very, very blessed person to have that family around me. Was very glad that we had a company like a Hogslat that could provide jobs to people in our community. Jobs that were different than maybe working in the tobacco patch or picking produce, as my family did for many years. As you well know, it was a different thing that you could go do and earn a living as those other things started to fade out and become less profitable at the scale they were back in our days. So very fortunate in that way. Some people would say that I overcame a lot of odds. I give credit to my Creator. I give credit to a lot of prayers. I give credit to our church at Carmore Church, Reverend Maddox, all the way back then, all the way forward to Penny Zimmer and Chris, who's there now. Just great people in a great community of faith did as much as anything I did. I got an opportunity and I was able to take that. As you said, I went to Campbell, went there for undergrad and law school. I always tell people it was a slow class during that law school class, or I wouldn't have been at the head of it. It must have been a real slow one, but no, a lot of wonderful people in that class who are great friends of mine to this day. And the real change for me was when I went to become a prosecutor. For me, that really, I found my groove in trying cases, in seeking justice, if you will. I had some great mentors in the practice of law. Went out to Sampson County, which is just east of Charlotte. Was one of two prosecutors there. We tried everything. There was nothing we didn't try. My first month, I was there trying jury trials, which is unusual for a prosecutor. And then stayed there for a few years, came back to Harnett County up in Lillington, did violent crimes there, armed robberies, rapes, murders, was specifically there to be a violent crimes prosecutor. Try cases there, secure convictions, and more than that though, always went in with an eye towards doing the right thing. Always went in with an eye towards seeking justice. It can be very easy as a prosecutor to get the conclusion that your job is to get convictions. But sometimes that's not justice. Sometimes the justice may be helping right a path someone may be on. You may have a young person that has picked up a possession of drug charge or something of that nature, and they may be on a bad path, and your job in seeking justice is to try to level that person up so they don't come back in that courtroom again. The conviction is going to bring them back in again. They're going to be a convicted felon. They're going to not succeed. Sometimes it's making a project out of that person and doing everything you can to help them turn a corner. And so I was very fortunate to get to practice with some great lawyers that gave me that opportunity. I was very fortunate to get to go to Harnett County and really find my home in the courtroom, making those arguments to juries, making those arguments to judges, but also trying to do a lot of good. What brought me back to Clinton was, I'll never forget it. I had wanted to come home for some time and practice. I always wanted to. One thing that I skipped over was I got into the practice of law because of Dale Johnson. Dale was one of my, I guess you say, childhood heroes. I met Dale when I was probably 10 or 11 years old. Dale just stood out to me as what a person should be in his profession, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. And wanted to come home and was glad to be able to do that.
We're going to go to break. I want you to come back and pick up right where you were, and I'm laying the foundation for where we're going, but I want you to cover that piece before we go any further. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking with Robert Gilmore about issues related to the law and some things that you may need to know that has deep roots in our community.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. My name is JW Simmons. The name of the show is We Should Know. We're talking with Robert Gilmore. We're talking about a number of issues, exploring Robert's life as a outstanding, top of his class graduate at University Campbell Law School, summa cum laude, which just simply means, Robert, there was nobody higher than you in your law class or your undergraduate law class. We appreciate so much you deciding to come back to your home county after traveling all over the state. You were alluding before we went to break, and of course we have to have these breaks. We thank our sponsors each and every week, but we have to have these breaks. But you mentioned someone that I think resonates with a lot of people in Clinton. It's an attorney that had some impact on your life, and it's a friend of ours, and God rest his soul, Dale Johnson.
Yep, Dale led to me becoming a lawyer. We forged a real friendship that carried on till the last week of his life. And then as far as me coming back to Clinton, it was Dale and a lot of conversations with our other dearly departed friend, Doug Parsons.
Absolutely.
Encouraged me to come home as he had, bring his great talents back to Sampson County when Doug or Dale, either one, could have been the top flight lawyer in Raleigh or Charlotte. They were not limited to being here.
It was their desire.
They wanted to be here. And I very much wanted the same thing. My practice has grown. It's been a very successful practice, and has really grown by leaps and bounds in the time we've had it open past several years. And it's been a real blessing to be able to come home and help folks of every walk of life from every corner of this county. One of the great blessings of my life. It's difficult. Sometimes you're home late at night. Sometimes Cole and Lyndon, my youngest one, I don't get to see Dad that day. They might see me for a fleeting moment, but I know that what I'm doing is I hope that what I'm doing is going to lead to a better tomorrow, not only for the people I'm directly helping, but them too. in our county. And so that drives me every day.
Well, I think your story to me says a lot, and first and foremost, as folks are listening to us today, I just feel compelled to tell people that, look around. People that have gone through a lot more challenges maybe than you have, but they have found a way out. And if you find a way out, somebody else can find a way out. It's a sense of wanting folks to feel like there's role models out there, and not sometimes we look at the wrong role models, and you've probably seen them in court, and you have to scratch your head and go, "What were you thinking?"
Yeah, certainly. That certainly happens, but when you see someone turn a corner, and I never give up on anybody. I mean, I don't have it in me to give up on people. If they show a blip of hope, I want to try to help them through it if we can. And sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. But that's certainly true. And I look at every day as a day where we can improve people, we can help, I can improve myself, and help people find that path that's going to make them a better person.
Robert, I want to get into a subject that seems to be either a part of, sometimes it's not necessarily a welcome part of our life, but it's causing a lot of reflection, I think, in the community. This show is known for its role as being not only information but education. You and I talked before we came on air that we could actually probably do a semester with just you sitting here kind of informing us. But I want to say this. We seek your counsel today in helping us understand what the rule of law is in our communities, for us as individuals, in the different aspects of life that we see. And the reason I ask that question, the reason I say it's important for folks to understand, we have witnessed over the past few months some pretty tragic things occurring in our communities throughout the country. We've seen people at odds with each other. We've seen the violation of things that we know are either local or state or even federal law. And it just seems to be maybe not dealt with as swiftly as we think. But then again, the rule of law in the judicial process was not intended to be fast. It was intended to be prudently and methodically dealt with. So I want to just turn that question to you. Help us understand what the rule of law is, and why do we see these things sometimes and it's like folks just seem to look the other way, and we see people destroying homes or burning somebody's house, or even in some cities, unfortunately, they'll burn the police department down.
Yeah, well, there's two parts to that, and I'll try to address them as brief as I can, but also getting across the information. The law is something that we've all kind of agreed to over time. So, from the earliest days of humanity, there's been a law. Right? There's been social construct as long as there's been society that says we all agree to these laws. Okay. In America, we kind of came to the position of a democracy. We kind of came to the position of saying, okay, we're going to create the laws and we're all going to govern together in a way. So we had representatives and things such as that to create laws. When we allow that construct to be violated in some form or fashion, where it says, well, the law doesn't apply in this situation, we're not going to enforce the law in this situation, it becomes very dangerous. One of the great things in our Constitution, we have so many points in there that are just there for a reason. They say Madison actually pushed for them to be enumerated so that we would know what they were and they would not be taken away. When you get down to one of the more basic ones, freedom of religion, okay? And we look at it, oftentimes people read that as freedom of my religion. I want my religion to be free. But the reason why we don't have an establishment clause, the reason we don't have an established religion in the United States of America is because tomorrow the majority religion may not be yours, okay? And so you don't establish one as a majority religion because you don't want to be governed by another one later that may not line up with your views. And that thread runs all the way through the Constitution. And the idea is that today someone may be espousing a message you like, and you may say, I like that message, therefore the law doesn't apply to that person, or the law doesn't apply to this situation. But tomorrow you may not like the message that's sent. And then if you try to enforce the law there, you lose the faith of the people. And when you lose the faith of the people, when you lose the faith of the governed, then the laws are no good. They only exist and work if we're all in it together. I've had conversations with people in courtrooms before. You've got 250 people sitting in that courtroom, sometimes all charged with felonies. Sometimes a good chunk of them may be charged with a violent crime, okay? The only thing between that entire audience and that judge or that prosecutor or the attorneys or the probation officers is maybe one or two people that have a gun on their hip. Now realistically, those one or two people can't stop all those people. But it's a social construct that we all agree to and that we kind of all uphold, that we're going to be orderly and that we're going to do things the right way. And when we start allowing things to be destroyed, when we start allowing things to happen that way with no consequences, then it all kind of goes out the window. And so, you know, I think that is, for me, what I think of when I think of the rule of law, is that kind of agreement we've all come to uphold the law and to hold each other accountable to the law, and we expect it to be upheld. I may not like it, but the way to solve what we don't like is by voting, electing people that we want to do certain things, not to take it into our own hands and do things the way that we've seen them done over the past several months.
And I think you alluded to something that is critical to just mention here too, as you mentioned James Madison and Alexander Hamilton and these guys, as they were forming this process that we call a Constitution. One of the things that struck me in looking at that is the idea that clearly, one of the things they did not want to even entertain was this idea of kingship anymore. That's one of the things that they were really removing themselves from, and there was such a disdain by the coming together of the folks in these colonies that was almost a passionate plea within the words within that Constitution. What am I missing there? How strong was that they wanted to nail this piece down that said there is the rule of law, and as you just pointed out, it applies equally across the board? It
was very core of the document. You know, before in other governments, I mean, even today, you don't get, you know, you talked about things moving slowly, and believe me, I know some of my clients, you know, and I talk about this regularly. Things do move deliberately and slowly. You know where things don't move deliberately? When you don't have rights. When you're just pulled into a courtroom, you're told you're guilty, you're not given a right to trial by jury, you may be executed within days, weeks of being told you're guilty without any process to really vet that being the case. And that was life in pre-colonial times of the way people live life. They were told by a king or a king's officer that they were guilty without real trial. And so that's one of the most beautiful things about our country, is that we have those rights, and that's the way we protect the rule of law. That's the way we protect people's rights. If something happens that's wrong, this system will ferret it out 99.9% of the times. I've seen it do it many, many times. And that's the beauty of the system we have. When we take it into our hands on the front end, it doesn't work the same. It can't be equal. It can't be uniform. And there are consequences to it that come back to us many, many years down the road, where someone says, and we've seen this even right now, wait a minute, you're saying this person can do this, but I can't do this. How is that fair?
Yeah.
And that has adverse consequences that we've got to protect against.
We're going to take another break. I'm going to come back and pick up right there. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Robert Gilmore. We're talking about legal issues from somebody that not only knows but has been a prosecutor, now practices law here in Clinton as a defense attorney. These are the kinds of things that you need to be aware of and try to understand and help us better understand you. We'll be back in a moment.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that adds a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody trying to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We want to thank you for being with us. The name of the show is We Should Know. If you happen to be riding down the road, just turn your radio on and you're listening to us every Tuesday at 2:30 on WCLN Radio. We're also coming to you on Star Communications, cable channel 16. Each week on Tuesday, Thursday at 7 p.m. The show also airs as well. We like to have your input. We thank you for your input. If you would continue to send those comments, recommendations, suggestions to weshouldknow@gmail.com. Just the name of the show, We Should Know, edu@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. If it was somebody you saw, if you'd like us to have them back, if you'd like us to do an expanded coverage of that, we're more than happy to entertain that. And over the past 10 years, we've appreciated your input. And again, you're a vital asset to this show, as you are our listening audience. We're talking with Robert Gilmore today. Robert, Sampson County, born and bred, grew up here. As you pointed out, grew up as I did in a blue-collar community, people that make things happen with their hands and elbows and getting up early in the morning, and very tenacious community. We share that. We're talking about your experiences, not only as being top of your class in law school and undergraduate, and literally challenging the system, I think, of folks that maybe, as you pointed out in your early story here today, what might wanted to put you in a category and said, well, this ain't gonna work. And for some reason, when that egg broke out, it went like a big oak tree. So we're talking about the law in the same kind of thing. When we look back at the Constitution and the kind of the point I think that you were making, the Constitution was put in a place, it seems, and a lot of this is general, so folks will understand we're not going to get too deep here because simply we don't have time. But when it was put in place, it was put in place almost like a methodical process that folks didn't get ostracized. They didn't get pushed aside because that experience had happened to many of these people that were putting this together with kings in various other countries, whether it was England, France, Italy, wherever. And as you pointed out so vividly, it struck me that the king could just say, I don't agree with that, go cut that person's head off, and they literally did that.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
So help us not only as we talk about the rule of law. Now comes this phrase that I think is a part of that process, and I want to get back, don't let us forget to get back to the freedom of speech thing, but part of that is something called due process. Help us understand how that thing that we look at as important being the rule of law, that you just can't do certain things like break the windows out of a store and decide to rob things and so forth. There's a rule of law that says that we as a society don't agree with that, but then there's also state and federal statutes that are in place that, depending on what you do, that has some impact on that. But there's also a due process, because when you look at that because nothing didn't happen, you and I both know there's a group of people that are called law enforcement people, criminal justice people, that are working in the background, gathering evidence that over a period of time, just because it didn't happen instantaneously does not mean something's not happening. Talk about that for me.
First, I'll say that the law enforcement officers in this community, whether they're state troopers or they work in the Sampson County Sheriff's Office, they work in the Clinton PD, Newton Grove Police Department, some of the finest people I've known. I mean, people I knew before they were law enforcement officers, people I've known as law enforcement officers, and they don't go into that job for the pay. They don't go into that job for the recognition. There are a lot of things they do every day to improve and help people's lives that no one ever hears about. And then we really owe a debt of gratitude to, I think, all first responders, firemen, as you know. My family's very involved in the fire department in our area. And we really owe a debt of gratitude to those people because they give many, many hours for not commiserate pay or compensation.
We call them family.
They do it because they love to do it. And they do it because they're servants. But on the point of the due process side of things, it's got two real facets. One, we're entitled to due process. By we, I mean anyone in the public that may be charged with something is going to be entitled to due process. That means they got a right to a trial. That means if they're charged with a crime, in almost every instance, they have a right to an attorney if they can't afford one. That means that they have a right to be heard on various things throughout that process. They have a right to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. They have certain evidentiary rights where in modern day North Carolina, everything has to be turned over to them if you're going to try them for an offense in front of a jury. They have to have access to all that evidence to ensure that they have a right to challenge that. They have a right to make the state meet its burden beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the old saying of we'd rather 1,000 guilty people go free than one innocent person sit in jail for something they didn't do. And that's kind of at the core of that whole construct. And that is very important. It's something we have to uphold because when we don't make sure that we got the right person and that they did the crime they were charged with, and that they have every opportunity to present a defense. And we hold the state to its burden, which rests with it, to the government, to prove that guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. When we move that goalpost even an inch, we're getting closer to where we were, to where we don't want to be, which is back into that situation of a government that can just come in and take your rights. Because if they can take that person's rights in the courtroom, they can come take your firearms, they can come take every right you have under the Constitution. The only way that there's a true test of rights in this country happens in a courtroom. You tell me a way to test your Fifth Amendment rights. You tell me a way to test your Sixth Amendment rights. You can't until there's a case and a judge and an opportunity. And I have that conversation with judges all the time. This is the one time that you get to protect your rights and my rights by protecting this person's rights. That being said, the other side of things is that law enforcement, it takes time for these things to happen. They're going to be gathering evidence. They have to send things off for testing. They have to make a decision sometimes of, do I arrest now? Do I wait for this to come back? I've got a threat of safety to the community. Maybe this person's a flight risk. Maybe I don't have the case buttoned down 100% yet, but I'm most of the way there. And we need to take this person in to prevent something else from happening. And that due process, that side of due process is that, we as a society give law enforcement that opportunity and should give law enforcement that opportunity because it keeps all of us safe. I joke with state troopers all the time when we're, talking in out of court or in the back or, on the side of the courtroom about, when I look at a DWI case and I look at it, and you'll know what this means, JW. I'll look at it and I'll say, oh man, there's no coming out of this one. You blew a high blow on the intoximeter. You have all kinds of evidence of your impairment. This is a case we're going to plead. Okay?
Call it a slam dunk kind of thing.
And so, I tell the troopers, I'm always glad that they have a good case because that means they're keeping our roads safe. And if something happens, one of those technical defects, as they call it, that I find, and I say, look, I've got to exercise this right on my clients. A lot of times the trooper and I will have a conversation after that hearing's over and that case is disposed of. And I'll say, this is what you could do to fix this in the future. Because I want a safer road. As much as I enjoy, but Doug would always say, don't ever call it winning the case, but winning the case. Yeah. As much as you may enjoy that, I like the fact that this person's keeping an impaired driver off my roads because I'm going to be driving down on my mother, my wife, my children, your family, these people's families will be driving down that road. And we want it to be safe. And so, that is kind of the two parts of due process in a nutshell. But it's something that we have to really guard against, because when we move that goalpost in that courtroom, and sometimes it is tempting when someone is charged with a particularly heinous crime to say, don't even give them a trial. Walk them out back. Let's do old school justice. We cannot take these people, harming children and things like that. Why are we wasting tax dollars on this person, this evil person? And the evidence may be overwhelming. But if we move that goalpost one time, we'll find later on that by the time we realize it's moved way down the field, it's too late, and it's hard to get it back where it was. So we have to do that every time. We have to protect that, and that's one thing a lot of people ask. They'll say, "How can a lawyer represent someone that they don't like or they think may be guilty?" And it's that bigger idea of, if law enforcement has done what it can, the prosecutor does what they're supposed to, and they've got a case, then I'm just there asking for some form of mercy. I'm there to validate the process and make sure it's done right, to protect all of our rights, not just theirs, but all of ours.
And make sure that process is and that methodology is a method that is used, the method is used, and that it is measured.
And that it is upheld.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
So when we look at these kinds of things and we think about the terms that we hear and the processes that we see, it evolves itself into another term we see a lot, which is this idea of what is justice. And justice sometimes becomes conflicted in the sense of what our emotion says versus what the actual statutes say. And so therefore, the folks that get so emotional end up doing these kind of nefarious things that is not by statute, when the statute could be changed. But then that's another branch of government that deals with the legislative issue. So to some degree, I'd like maybe when we come back from break, get into a brief discussion on that three branches of government and the critical importance of both of all three of those branches, and make sure that folks understand that these are the kinds of things that although it seems, as you pointed out, a long time, it's better to be a long time than be that one thing that breaks the dam and explodes the community. Mm-hmm. So let's look at that when we come back, just for a brief moment, and I want to get into something else. Again, I'd love to have about 2 semesters. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here with us today. We're talking about issues that is so critical to your life and impacts you each and every day when you might not even realize it or think about it. Call a friend, stay tuned.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks for being with us. We are at that moment in the show that I've got to tell you, we're coming up on our last segment. And many times with our guests, I want to keep people here for maybe the rest of the day. No, I can't do that. A lot of things we're going to talk about in this last segment. Call a friend if you need to now, but stay tuned. We're talking about law. We're talking about how it impacts you, how it applies in your community, how it may be impacting you, and you really don't even know it now. But it's critical issues that you need to know. And we're talking with Robert Gilmore, literally, in my opinion, a scholar in the field. We're so blessed in many ways to have you here in Clinton and Sampson County, Robert. Glad you decided to stay here after you left our little community and come back. I'm pleased you're here. We're talking about some very serious issues, though. And one of the things I wanted to touch on in this last segment, and you just can't do it brief, but I'm going to try to keep it brief, is this whole idea of the way we're structured with our government, with 3 branches of government, that each one impacts the other. And we look at the legislative, that branch that does things with the budget, that makes laws, that comes up with laws. We're talking about the executive branch of government, both on the state and the federal level. And then we're talking about the judicial piece of this. When the Founding Fathers put this thing together, this was well thought out and some would say almost disastrously argued as this come together. And once you see this from your eyes, which many of us will never do that because we're not going to be in court as a prosecutor, and we're not going to be in court as a defense attorney, but help us understand how critical it is for each piece of that government to work interactively, and help folks understand you can't just go out and say, well, I don't agree with that, so I'm going to do something that's really perverse because I personally don't, and maybe I got 50 people that don't.
Right.
We talked a little bit about it in the first segment, but I want to kind of touch that as it relates to the three components.
Well, you know, and it's one of those things that we have to govern as we expect the governed to act. You know, we as people that, you know, either feel the executive or legislative or judicial branch, they have to act as they expect the citizens to act, and you know, it's kind of a mirror of each other. The executive branch and enforces the laws. The legislative branch makes the laws. The judiciary interprets the laws. So, you know, it starts out in legislature. Executive branch enforces. Executive branch meaning anyone from a president or a governor right on down to law enforcement, and then the judiciary is there to kind of test, review, interpret, and make sure those laws are fair, are being applied properly, and kind of make sure that there's a check. And it's called
that application process.
Checks and balances, right? So, you know, for many, many years, it's worked phenomenally. You know, I remember hearing someone say that a great judge should probably not be that recognized in the courtroom. In other words, you shouldn't hear much from them, and there shouldn't be a lot of public, you know, notoriety around them, because what you're doing is a very solemn job. It's a job of making sure things are done equally, making sure things are done dispassionately, making sure things are done fairly. Too often in modern political times, the judiciary has been weaponized, and it's been weaponized to subvert the legislative process, or perhaps subvert the executive process. And the idea becomes, same thing we talked about earlier, where you may have a judge or a panel of judges or justices that says, I don't like that law, help me find a way to get rid of it. Help me find a way to toss it out. You know, and the idea becomes, whatever road I have to go down, no matter how tortured it may be, no matter how different it may be than where we've been before, I'm going to try to find a way to throw this law out because I don't like it. Okay? Judges can't do that any more than the public can. You don't have to like a law. You don't have to agree with a law. The only questions really for the court is the law constitutional? And you should be pretty honest about that and not try to torture it to the point that you find a way for it to be unconstitutional or stretching a rule to try to get there. And then beyond that, is it being fairly applied, and is there some sort of injustice here that's happening with this law that will violate someone's constitutional rights? When we look at those things, if those answers are there, the judge is there to make a select amount of decisions, whether it's at the district court level all the way up to the Supreme Court level, and that should be it. But too often we're having judges act as legislators, decide they want to make the law, things that are nowhere written in the law, nowhere written in the case law even, not just the statutory law that's in the books written down as, you know, nice simple laws, but even in the case interpreted. And all of a sudden out of left field you've got this new idea that's never existed before. When we do that, it's Pandora's box, because later on someone else is going to take that and twist it in another way to do something we may not like.
In essence, that's subversive to even consider doing that.
That's right. And that is so key to our foundations, is that there's a separation between those three branches of government.
Robert, I want to move this conversation a bit, because I know that you and your family have made a decision, and it's a career decision for you. We've talked about your experience not only in law school, but your academic experience. We've talked about your experience as a prosecutor. We've talked about your experience as a lawyer. Today people have heard what some of your observations are, because you've certainly helped us get a clearer picture and understand what the legalities are and what, quote, the law is. We've talked a bit about things that we could, again, expand horizons, I guess, of time in. But you made a decision that you want to be a judge. More specifically, I would ask you if you could tell us what kind of drove you to that decision. Obviously, you have a passion. No question, you have knowledge and scholarly expertise in law. What drove you to that, and particularly in the area of as a jurist in the district court area? Kind of just talk about it from the sense of that as a personal issue, and then if we have time, maybe you can get in a little bit with folks to understand what that particular role is. Okay.
So for me, it wasn't really something that I woke up one morning and said I want to be a judge. You know, a great judge I know, and just a great human being. He told me one time, as a mentor of mine, he said, Robert, if you think you should run for office, you might ought to think again, because you're kind of anybody's biased to themselves. But if someone else that you respect thinks you might ought to run for office or consider it, then that's when it's time to really give that thought. And I had a lot of members of the bar, of the legal community, of law enforcement, just all around come to me, a great diverse group of people from all backgrounds, and say, listen, we think you ought to do this. You know, if people like you, even though your practice is successful, similar to our friend Doug Parsons, who had a extremely successful practice, maybe the most successful practice anyone's ever had in this county. If people like you don't, maybe take this job that it may not be as lucrative as as what you do, then we're not going to wind up with the best people, and we need the best people. And I was very humbled by that, gave that a lot of prayer and consideration, conversation with my family, and decided to file for district court here in Sampson County. I'll be on also in Duplin, Jones, and Onslow. I'll be on the ballot in November. It'll be the only contested local judicial election in November. For me, what led me to the district court bench is, it's the bench of the people. It's the people's court, okay? It is the court where, if you're charged with a misdemeanor, which is the most common thing for someone to be charged with, that's where you're going to go. If you and your spouse are getting a divorce, that's where you're going to go. If Department of Social Services has to get involved with a child, that's where it's going to be. And so it is the court that makes all these decisions that touch so many lives. And I'm just a man of the people. You've been so kind to me, to describe me as a scholarly person, and all these great compliments. But I see myself, I'm just a redneck farm boy from Sampson County. I'm just a regular guy, and I love being able to help people in the regular problems of their life. And I saw that opportunity when it was presented to me, and really presented to me in that way, to help a lot of people and bring the experiences I've had from down here as, just a blue-collar family, to the successes I've been able to have, and also to the things I've learned to help those folks and make their lives better, hopefully, and help make the good decisions for those folks. So that's what really put me there. And the district court is probably the most important court we have. For me, because it touches so many people, for me, I look at it like I'm going to be a conservative judge. What that means to me is we're going to apply the law as it's written. We're not going to go in there as an activist, and we're not going to go in there to throw the baby out with the bathwater when we just decide we don't like something. That fairness, that consistency, the work ethic that I was raised with, which is, JW, have you ever been to the shop there on Gilmore Lane and seen anybody not working? We work 7 days a week. That work ethic that the taxpayer's going to get every dime they pay into that system, because we're going to be there working, from beginning to end of the day, to give people the chance to have their case heard and have it heard consistently Monday through Friday.
The consistency of that, and the key thing that struck me, Robert, in your commentary, is that people can look at you and there's some part of your life they can relate to. Some part of your life they can say, that could have been me at this period of time, or I had this struggle, or I had that struggle. But you overcame it. And the other thing that struck me, and I'll give you about 15 seconds to close, but is the care and concern you've got for people. I'll give you about 10 seconds to close now.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for having me on, JW. Thank the people for listening and giving me that opportunity. I'd encourage them to get out and vote in November. I hope that they'll give me this opportunity and allow me to bring this forth and help our community move forward.
Thanks for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening today. We look forward to maybe having Robert come back and talk to you again. May God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host JW Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.